Artie Freed, welcome.
Thank you.
Did you have a middle name that you ever used, Artie?
Philip.
Whose was that? Where did that come from?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
It comes from a pack of Philip Morris cigarettes.
You're kidding.
Swear, my mother didn't know. I'm named after an uncle somewhere along the line, but she didn't know how to spell it. So they had a pack of cigarettes laying next to them in the hospital. That's why I wound up with 2 L's instead of 1.
Were you ever a smoker?
Yes.
How long ago since you stopped?
I started at age 13 and gave it up at about age 30.
Tell me you smoked Philip Morris.
Nah,
No.
Marlboro, man.
Okay, all right, okay.
Marlboro.
Who was Anthony? Artie, I'm sorry, Anthony. Yeah, right. I told you I was losing the edge. I told you that before.
That's all right. Another uncle somewhere along the line, my mother's side of the family, I don't know. I'm the youngest of all of the grandchildren in the family. My mother had 7. There were 7 kids in my mother's family, and of all the cousins, I'm the youngest. She had a nephew that was the same age as she was.
Wow.
So the family. So we weren't that close at points. So it was interesting.
Was your father's family a small family, or was it also?
No,
a
they
large
hated
family?
each other. They never talked to each other.
What? But how many were there?
They were. Let's see. My father had a sister and a brother and himself.
Okay, so they were only. So he came from a relatively small family then, right? But the relationship was not great in that family.
No.
What do you know about the backgrounds of both your mother and father's family? Did you know your grandparents first of all?
Yeah. I knew my grandfather, on my father's side, they came over from Russia. He was very unique. He was illiterate in 2 languages, Russian and in English. But he came over here and he opened a stable when he came to this country. And my mother's father and mother, they came from Austria, but he was very skilled. He was a master stair builder and managed to make a small fortune here in this country before he lost it all during the Depression.
And we have to talk about that sometime off camera because that's what my grandfather did too as well. Very interesting. I never knew that.
He lost everything. It's funny. My mother tells me he had paid cash for all the stocks and everything, but like everybody else, he panicked and threw it all away. If he had saved it, I wouldn't be sitting here now.
Yes, yeah. And on the other side of the family, your grandparents on the other side.
That was my mother. My mother's side was the stair builder. My father's side.
Your father's side was okay.
They owned. I said he opened the stable, and then later on, when the automobiles came in, he converted it to a gas station garage. So.
What? Presently, you're living in Stony Brook, where you've been for a long time.
That's right.
And tell us. I know you have a son.
Right.
And I know your wife is deceased.
My wife passed away. That's right. Which was about the worst thing that ever happened.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. How did you get through that period? That was 3 years ago.
How did I get through that period? I don't know.
You were working. You were teaching.
Yeah, I took off the time for the teaching when she was after I diagnosed her illness. I took off about 6 months, something like that, from school.
What did she die as a result of?
Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Young cancer. It was diagnosed. She didn't have a chance. They caught it late, and that was the end of that. I tell you, don't ever mess with cancer.
No, that's a.
But I got through it. Good friends, people from school. People were absolutely amazing. They really, I tell you, the Brentwood School family, absolutely amazing group of people.
So you felt it at that time too. I mean, we felt it in other times, but at a time of need like that.
No, you can't feel it until they come through the way they did.
Is that right?
Absolutely unbelievable. They were cooking meals for me. I mean, anything they could do. I mean, there was nothing that was too much. Amazing group of people.
Let's talk about your son.
My son? My son is a very unique individual. My son actually is adopted. He's actually adopted twice. My wife had been married before. She adopted him. And then her ex-husband gave him up for adoption when I got married. And we adopted him. The funny thing was, this was a cute story, that when we went for the final adoption in front of the judge, my son has no middle name. His name is Seth Freed. And the judge said to me, "Here's a chance for you to have a middle name. What would you like?" He looks right at the judge. He says, "Batman." So I said, maybe you ought to think about that one for a while, and we can always change it later. Seth was a chore bringing him up. He's one of the best people you'll ever meet. He was a little self-destructive growing up. His 8 years in college were very fruitful. Turns out he's the success of the family, though. He's got a great job now. He's in the entertainment business. He works for the Blue Man Group. He's the business manager for the Blue Man Group, the head of their record division, and star of their softball team in the Broadway Show League.
He could probably put on a little makeup and jump right into the act.
He almost had to once. One of the guys was late for an interview. They were getting ready to stick him in because they don't talk once they're in makeup. So, but he's great. He's a great kid.
You were at where were you in your own birth line in the family? Were you an only child?
Well, my sister, as I always say, was an only child. My family hated me. I was one of two. My sister was 7 years older than me. She too passed away from cancer.
Oh, Artie.
Oh, yeah, we had a lot of luck. My wife's brother died at 30 something from a heart attack. We've gone through it. My father passed away. He was in his early 50s.
You're a survivor in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what makes me so cheery.
I wanted to ask you because I asked you before. What was your wife's name?
Marlene.
And how old was she when she passed away?
54.
Yeah.
Interesting. The other part is we may have been cousins.
How so?
This is a funny story. My mother tells the story that when her family left Austria, my mother's maiden name is Drucker. My wife's maiden name is Drucker. When the family left Austria, part of the family went to England. My wife's father comes from England.
That is very synchronistic. I don't understand how these things happen, but they do. You mentioned that your son is very successful now, but you said he was a handful as he was growing up.
Yeah.
I bet you those qualities that he has all have served him very well presently, though. They're all...
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In the business world, all his conniving has done him well. He's absolutely a gorgeous young man, too. He's got these big blue eyes, and I wish he'd get married. Time for grandchildren already.
Spoken like a papa.
That's it.
Where were you born?
Brooklyn, New York.
Where in Brooklyn?
Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Ah. And what year was that, Artie?
1945.
All right, so you were born right at the end of World War II.
That's correct. And my doctor was paid in a very unique manner. They ought to call me B.F. Goodrich because when I was born, the doctor needed tires for his car more than he needed my father's money. So my father was working with his father in the gas station business at that time, paid him with 4 tires.
Very interesting story. Yeah.
But what's interesting too is my father was a Columbia graduate and a pharmacist. But when his father got sick, he went to work with his father at the gas station. He had to take over the family business.
What are some of the earliest memories of family that you have? Now, if you grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, it's a very different part of Brooklyn today than it was then.
Not that much different. The reason we moved to Queens is because I came home from kindergarten with a lead pipe in my pocket one day. And my father said, time to move.
Okay. And
it was funny, but actually the funny part about moving is we moved to Flushing, Queens. And at that time, Flushing, Queens was out in the middle of nowhere. You took there was Horace Harding Boulevard at that time. And you drove out traffic light after traffic light. I'll never forget. We went to visit some friends who had moved to Flushing. And they had a gorgeous house. And my father said, if I could find a house like this, I'll buy it in a minute. Guy said, the house next door is for sale. They took a flashlight, they looked in the window, and the next day my father bought the house for $5,300.
Yeah. And what year?
And that was 1950.
Right.
1950,
wonderful. Yeah. The memories that you have of your mother as a child.
My mother could actually cook back then. It was the skill she lost later in life.
She's 91 years old today.
91. She'll be 91 in December. Yeah, she's an amazing person. My mother was a real home mother. She as a young woman. I mean, of course, I didn't know it then, but she was quite an active woman. She was horseback riding, tennis. She was a real woman of the 20s and 30s. You know, growing up. with all of the, she had her own car. That's how she met my father. She was one of the few people that had her own car. My father was working for his father in the gas station. And I think that they met through the gas station in Brooklyn there. And
now she had a big family, an extended family.
right.
Did you spend time with all of the family? So were you closer with your mother's side of the family?
Yeah,
then?
very much close. Especially my grandmother on my mother's side. She even lived with us for a while. She lived to be 94.
Really?
Yeah.
Good genes, Artie.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I'll never forget. She was 94. She was living by herself in an apartment. And she got sick and she went to the hospital. I remember talking to her on the phone and she says, Arthur, I'm going to die. Next day she died. Shut herself down and that was it.
Were there other people other than your immediate parent? I mean, your parents or your grandparents that were important growing up. Other adult influences that were very important to you.
Yeah, we had next door. My family, the Kleins lived next door. They had lived next to us in Brooklyn, and I told you so. We bought the house right next door to them when we visited. It was like two houses, but one house. We, lived together. We did everything together, and they were nice people. They had a big influence, and there was always my Uncle Harry, who was the family millionaire. He got the new Cadillac every year and smoked the big cigars. And I remember he used to go down to Miami every winter for the winter and whatnot. And he was like the patriarch of the family.
Where'd you get your sense of humor from?
Laughing at life.
You didn't have any role models with a sense of humor like that, or there was no one else in the family that?
No, I was the class clown in high school. I wasn't the most popular kid with my teachers then either.
Speaking of teachers, who do you remember?
Who do I remember? I remember Miss Starr, my 7th grade teacher. She was my social studies teacher. I think she's the reason I became a social studies teacher. Oh, what was it? The guy who taught at the high school here in Brentwood. The tall, thin guy. Oh, I can't think of his name. He was my 7th grade teacher. And so,
Herb Laub? No. Herb Laub. Tall, thin guy.
I'll think of it in a little while.
Okay.
Anyway, and it was funny, when I came here to teach in Brentwood, there was, as a matter of fact, I remember standing in the hallway one day.
Bill Lane?
Huh?
Bill Lane?
I'll think of it. Anyway, we were standing in the hallway with Nick Geraci, him and myself, 3 generations of teachers, because Nick had been my student. And we went through all that. Then I had my 5th grade teacher, Miss Quinlan. She used to check behind our ears to see if we cleaned behind our ears. Yeah. Oh, and then there was Mr. Vaccio. He was really something. He was my teacher in high school the year that the UFT went on strike, and he was a leader of the UFT. And I remember when the strike was broken, him coming back in the classroom in tears.
We're going to talk about that because you became active, very active, years later. And
I like the money.
Before we leave this whole category of questions, your growing up and early experiences, is there anything that you want to tell me about that I haven't known enough to ask you about?
My heroes in my
memories.
life.
Heroes, good. Yeah.
Hopalong Cassidy.
Okay.
Matter of fact, my mother was able to take my bottle away from me when I used to suck on when she bought me my Hopalong Cassidy suit. And of course, the greatest hero of all, Howdy Doody. Actually, when I went down to the Smithsonian Institute and saw Howdy hanging there, I really was crying. He was my real hero.
And Buffalo Bob and Clarabelle.
Buffalo Bob Smith and all the Clarabelle, Princess Summerfall, Winter Spring, and his twin brother. Howdy Doody's twin brother, Double Duty. Yeah.
Do you have any associations these days with people that you went to high school with? Are you still in touch with any high school buddies? Or
it's funny you should ask. Just recently, through the internet, I got in touch with my first girlfriend from junior high school. We were 12 years old, and we've renewed the old friendship.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. She's amazing. She has all the old pictures. She has everything. She saved everything.
Where does she live?
She lives in New Jersey. She's happily married and everything.
That's wonderful.
I've been down to visit a couple of times. It's really funny. The internet's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
Artie, what was your first paying job?
My first paying job?
And do you remember how much you made?
All I remember, the first job I had was I worked for 2 days for an optometrist in the city running errands. The first real paying job I got was working for Long Island Lighting. They had summer programs to hire high school kids. And they paid good money in those days, $4 or $5 an hour back in those days. I made a lot of money during the summers. And they wouldn't let us do anything either because they hired us, but anything that had to be done by a union man.
Oh.
So we used to had about 20 college kids. We used to sit around and have a ball. They used to give us a car. We used to go down to Jones Beach and count the light poles.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
What was there? There must have been at least one family holiday that was big growing up.
Oh, we had all the holidays, Passover, the Jewish holidays.
Okay.
Passover was always a biggie. We always had the Seder at my house. We had it when my parents had it, and then when my wife was alive, we had it. Matter of fact, I had my first Seder since she passed away this year in the house. All of them, obviously on Yom Kippur we didn't have a big meal.
You mentioned
anyone knew about.
You mentioned that you've been active in your temple.
Right.
Have you always been active in the temple?
Well, it starts with my family. My mother and father started actually the synagogue in Queens in my basement of my house. So they were responsible. As a matter of fact, the synagogue in Queens is a room dedicated to my father. And then when we came out, it was funny, when I got married, we weren't active in the synagogue. And all of a sudden, my wife got active in the synagogue, and she became vice president. And then when she passed away, I just continued doing what she was doing.
Was this up in the Stony Brook area?
Yeah. It's been a good part of my life.
As a kid, what were you interested in more than anything else?
Sports.
You were?
24 hours a day.
Just all kinds of sports?
Anything you could play. Punch ball, stick ball, stoop ball, all the city games, We used to go down to the lots to play baseball and football without helmets.
What schools did you attend?
I went to PS 163. Well, I went to PS 25 in Brooklyn for kindergarten. Spent 3 of my best years in kindergarten. I actually got out in 1. Then I went to PS 163 in Queens. Then Campbell Junior High School in Flushing, which is now the law school of Queens College. And I was in the first graduating class of Francis Lewis High School. Oh. And we're having our 40th reunion in Disney World in 2003.
Oh, wow. So you've kept connected there?
Well, on the internet, all the people, they got these class lists and everything else.
Right.
So everyone.
What were your favorite subjects in school?
In high school?
Yeah. Favorite subjects. And least favorites, too.
Actually, the funny thing was history. Math was the worst. Oh.
Okay.
Math and Spanish.
Yeah. No coincidence that you became a history teacher, right?
I mean, when I picked the college, I looked, I said, where don't I have to take a foreign language and where don't I have to take math?
When did you first discover that there was a Brentwood?
I also went to the University of Bridgeport.
Oh, you did?
Then I went to Bridgeport, and I went to Hofstra, Post, Stony Brook.
To finish the degrees.
All the degrees.
And now you have a master's degree.
I have my professional diploma.
Okay. Yeah. And you've heard about Brentwood or first came to Brentwood? How?
I first came to Brentwood. They had a placement service. I went at the University of Bridgeport for teachers. I'd never heard of Brentwood in my life.
You heard about Brentwood in Bridgeport?
In Bridgeport, I was on the bulletin board. Absolutely. The only thing I knew about Brentwood is I had some friends who had graduated and were going to Stony Brook, which nobody had ever heard of, at the university for graduate work. So I took, that's how I knew approximately what Brentwood was. I applied. And I remember applying. It was the funniest thing in the world. I came out here to Brentwood. I had applied for a job at the high school. And I came out here and I had an interview with Fred Weaver. And I walk into Fred's office. There must have been 100,000 applications in that office. All over, in the back of him, in front of him, on his desk, on the floor. I mean, everywhere. And then he starts throwing them all over the place. He said, never mind, I'll interview you without the application. So he interviews it halfway through the interview. He says, I don't need a social studies teacher. He says, why am I interviewing you? He said, but they need people over at the junior highs. He said, why don't you go over to the junior high? They'll interview you over there. So he calls over to the junior high, and I get in the car and I drive over. First of all, I went to the wrong building, and they all look the same. I mean, you can't tell the difference. So I finally wound up over at East Junior High School, and I was interviewed first by George Pittman and then Ed Murphy over there, without an application, without even knowing if I was in the school. They hired me. Did you want the job? And I said, yeah, I'll take the job. And I went to work for the princely sum of $6,300 a year.
In what year was this now?
67.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
When your first impressions, that first year of the district?
I quit
Brentwood?
after 1 week.
You did?
I resigned after 1 week.
That must have
1
been...
week working under that at East in those days was an experience. But Ed Murphy convinced me to stay. He said, give it another month and see what happens.
Who were you working under at that time?
George Pittman.
Okay.
And
And after 1 week, you said, impossible.
I said, this is crazy. I said, no one can work under these conditions. But I stayed. The end of the first year, I quit again.
Did you?
Yeah. But it was funny. At that point, they had changed principals. They brought in Steve Howland.
Yes.
And I walked in and I to give in my resignation. And Steve says, shut the door. And I shut the door and he says, are all the stories I heard about this place true? I said, yeah, you don't want to go anywhere. We're going to have fun here. You'll enjoy teaching here. And he convinced me to stay. And then the rest was history.
And he proved himself right.
Oh, he was the best.
Yeah.
He was the best.
Yeah.
Thorough professional. He would defend his teachers to the hilt, whatever, no matter what you did, and then close the door and tell you what you did wrong.
There was a culture created at East Junior High. In those days, it was called East Junior High. But there was a culture created there that became so well known throughout the district.
That was family. It was laughter in the hallways.
Yeah.
I mean, everything. It was a joyous place to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew if you screwed up, you'd hear it, but hear it professionally, and you would be backed up. And we did good things for kids. The kids came first.
Some of the people that you worked with back then, Artie.
Well, my best friend, Ivan Lazarus, who's retiring this year.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Rabin was there in those days. Then the new teachers came in, like Sue Campbell. But that's the new teachers. Ed Frick, Rick Belvin, Gail Inzerillo, Gail Atella now, Frank Carnese.
Yes, yes.
Esther Klein was one of the new teachers also. She came later. We got to separate the new teachers from the old teachers. There's a year separating us.
Yes.
Marty Rigger was there.
The guidance counselor, Joan Thorpe.
Well, Joan wasn't a guy. Joan was an English teacher.
She was an English teacher.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, she unfortunately
Right.
passed away. Her husband Chris was there. Mo Green was there for a while. Everyone who was an administrator in the district passed through there. Bob Marcus was there with his ponytail. Great story about Bob Marcus. If you take a look at Bob, who's a very close friend of mine. Mr. Conservative today was Mr. Hippie in those days. And one of the great stories was when Ruth Rosenthal bought him a new pair of pants. She said, no more holes. Bob used to come in with his knapsack, with his paycheck stuffed in the bottom. He forgot to cash him. We had quite a bit of characters. John Quinlan. He was... and then my very close friend Alan Zimmerman, the art teacher who passed away in his 30s. Well, he had a heart. Just great people.
Artie, my association with East and my meeting...
And it was John Sharon.
Yes, and meeting you was in 1983, and to tickle a couple of the unpleasant memories of that year.
That was the year
that we had the incident, and
That's right.
And I remember what I remember of it, or part of what I remember of it, is the aftermath and switching classrooms. And you and I did a classroom switch. Do you remember that?
That's right. I went into the classroom where the incident took place.
Yeah.
Still a bullet hole in the wall there.
Is that right?
Still
Why did you do that? What?
Because Peggy didn't want to go back in the room.
I see.
Oh, I forgot Peggy.
Yes.
Peggy Del Benny, the angel of the universe.
Yes. Peggy just retired.
Yeah, she retired the same year I did. Peggy, of course. How could I ever forget her?
That was a life-changing experience, though, wasn't it? That day, that event.
I don't know.
Really?
I mean, there were funny parts to the day as well.
Okay.
There's the stories that people don't know that went on. A couple of funny stories that happened. We had an art teacher, Mickey Fulton, and we were sitting in the building, and we were there all day. Mickey got hungry. So what do? You call out to order in food. So Mickey calls the local pizzeria, and the guy's taking the order, and he says, where is this going? And he says, to East Junior High School. The guy says, isn't that where the shooting took place? So Mickey says, yeah. The guy says, I'm not delivering over there. Mickey starts yelling at him, you're a public restaurant and you have to start delivering over here. I said, we'll have your license if you don't deliver. Then there was, I called my wife. I didn't want, this thing was going to be on national news and national television. So I called her in her office and I said, look, Molly, I said, I don't want you to be afraid. I said, there's a class being held hostage here at school. There's a gunman in the building. So we can't get out of the building. She says, look, I'm not in the mood for your stupid jokes. And she hangs up on me. 2 minutes later, the phone rings again. Get out of that building. What are you doing in that building? There's a gunman in the building. I said, don't worry. I said, everything's under control. I said, besides, I'm not leaving my car in Brentwood overnight.
Leave it to you to have a different take on things. That's a perspective that I have not yet heard.
No, yeah. I tell you, there's a lot of other parts of this thing. Mr. Neisowitz, our superintendent of school, his career was made on that day.
Is that right?
Absolutely. He did a fabulous job in taking control of what was going on, and in appreciation, they realized they had a good man, and he was on the move from then on in. And of course, that was a good choice all the way around.
That was during the tenure of Guy DiPietro, who you also had contact with.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, and it was an interesting day in the building. Different people reacted different.
Sure.
Well, actually, that's the funny part of the whole thing was how it started for me the day. Jim Doig, another close friend of mine, Jim Doig, and I were in the men's room when this whole thing started, right? So we hear these announcements, don't change classes, this and that. So I said to Jim, let me go out and see what's going on here. Mm-hmm. So I go out, and there's a guy in the hall with a leather vest on, tattoos on his arm, this big rifle in his hand, putting these shells, and I run into the men's room. Don't go out, Jim.
Oh, my gosh.
I said, don't go out, Jim. I said, whatever you do. I said, they won't put us in the movie anyway. I said, we'll be in the men's room here. I said, you don't want to go out.
Artie, regardless of the job description that you've had over all these years for what you've done, how did you see your purpose in being a teacher and being in the classroom? There was something that drew you to it. You mentioned early teachers that influenced, and then hearing about an announcement up in Connecticut and deciding to come down to Brentwood for an interview. Once you got there and you were immersed in the Brentwood culture and the culture of East, how did you define your purpose?
The first year I had no purpose, to be quite honest. It was absolute chaos. I didn't really find a purpose in what I was doing. It took me 8-9 years to become a good teacher. It really did. I was caught up early on with, to be friends with the kids and whatnot and everything. And then I began to realize these kids have all the friends they need outside. They need teachers. And that's when I began to define my role. And I always tried to maintain a line. I was with the kids and for the kids and never lied to the kids. That was something in my class, they knew. If something was happening in the building, my kids knew. I never lied to them about anything. And
so there was a trust established right away.
I think so. Yeah. And it's funny, it's continued. I've been retired 2 years and I just got 3 more invitations to graduation.
So that anticipates another question about contact with.
I stayed in contact with a number of them, yeah. Especially on the internet. I get all the time.
Wonderful.
I get email with a number of them. Some nights it's 5 or 6 of them. You got to juggle it around.
Yeah. What about BTA now? How did the connection or the contact there first get made? Were you, as a non-tenured teacher, you probably pretty much stayed.
Tenure was, it's funny. Tenure was not the issue then that it is today. I don't think I ever heard the word tenure mentioned until they told me I got it. Today, I see these young teachers getting hit over the head with it. You got to do this, you got to do that. We were never hit over the head with it. You went in, you did your job. If you did it, at the end of the 3 years, you got your tenure. At the end of 2 years, if you weren't getting your tenure, they told you goodbye. And things were really different. I mean, there was no standard evaluation form. I remember my first year's evaluation form was like 25 pages long, written with all these inane comments and everything else. And actually, I got involved in the union to protect myself at first. And then I found my role with my friend Karen Stoyahan to protect young teachers. That's what we spent our last few years doing. And, a lot of them resented what I did and thought I had a big mouth and I did things. But I never did anything I didn't think was right.
What were you protecting younger teachers from?
An administrator
Okay. All right.
who was taking advantage. I remembered what it was like, really, my first year, and how much of a job it was just to be there.
Yes.
And to have to go to every dance there was, and to run every club that there was in the building, to go to the district was requiring them to go to classes, to go to graduate school.
Yeah. All these extra assignments, duties, and yeah.
Somebody had to say no at some point. And they weren't in a position to say no. And when you get to 20, 25 years and tenure, it's a wonderful place to be.
True.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that the not just I assume the union, but also the family, Brentwood. There's been a time when you really have depended upon, or not so much that you depended upon, they were there for you without your even asking.
Yeah. Well, all the teachers, they came from people from all over came through. But my union activity, my first and foremost goal in the union was money. I was always.
Were you on any of the were you ever a building representative?
As a building representative, I was on the executive council.
You were.
And I challenged one year the president for the presidency. Still like to know what happened to that mysterious box of ballots that disappeared, but I won't go into that issue now.
So you did really get involved in
Absolutely.
politics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I felt,
What were the years that you were?
Right through. It was just right up to the end, I guess. I was active. I gave up the executive council about 3 or 4 years before I retired, but otherwise I was active from about 70 on up through, on and off.
Do you have any superintendent stories to tell us?
Superintendent.
I mean, you saw several of them.
No, I never really had that. Just that for some reason, whenever I walked into Central, I would hear a click of their door. I don't understand why.
Here comes Free.
That was about it.
Okay.
I understand that I wasn't the most popular man in town with them. Principal stories, I have a couple, but
Why do you think that is? Because you were outspoken, Artie?
I was outspoken.
Yeah.
People, didn't want. I found that the people who, quite frankly, people who moved up in this district had the one word in their vocabulary. Yes, they didn't see some of the problems.
Yes.
And they didn't want to deal with the issues. And if you wanted to deal with the problems and issues, you knew that you're going to stay where you are. But I'll tell you the truth. I have my administrative degree. I did work in the office when Joe Communale was in the building and he was sick. He had his hip replacement. I covered for him in the office, and realized at that point my place was in the classroom. I loved classroom teaching. That was my job, and I did it good.
Of all the things that you were involved in, is there one activity or one accomplishment that you could say you're the most proud?
I did a lot of things. I coached sports there. I coached football at the junior high and middle school, lacrosse, girls soccer. What else? Organized the first stepping up ceremony at the middle school, the first graduation that they had there with Bob Sokoa.
Is there anything that you
I'm proud of what I did in the classroom.
Yes.
I'm proud of the kids that went through and the kids that succeeded. And as I told the kids, I said, you may not want to pass. I said, but I'm going to be the biggest pain in the ass you have, so you might as well pass. Because I'm not going to let you fail. You're going to have to work hard at doing it.
Was there anything that you would like to have accomplished that you weren't able to see done?
No. Okay. My career I enjoyed. The time was right to leave when I left, and it was good. I have no complaints. I managed to do one thing every day before I left the building, and I was banned from the building for came back to sub.
What's that?
I would leave the principal with a headache every day before I left the building. I found something on a daily basis to agitate him with.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So you at some point you said you decided that it was time.
Yeah.
And when did that happen?
After my wife passed away, the state was offering me a nice pension. There was a chance to do what I wanted to do. I was getting tired of a time clock. I was actually very fatigued. Period. It took a lot. What I went through took a lot out of me. And I said, I gave it an extra 6 months to wait and see. And I said, something, time to go. And I'm not sorry I did it.
No. And since that time, you have had concerns about your mother.
Yeah, I run back and forth to Florida. My mother.
Where is she in Florida?
Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
Yeah, hanging in there. So I go down there and use her as an excuse to play golf.
Is there any family down there, or is she by herself?
She's all by
right
herself.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. So you get in some golf down there?
I get my golf in down there. And,
Do you play with any of the Brentwood people that down in that area?
no, but it was funny one day. I'm playing golf on a golf course, and
In Fort Lauderdale?
in Fort Lauderdale, and they put me in a foursome. I came as a single, and the guy said, one of the young guys in the group says to me, "Where you from?" I said, "New York." He said, "Hey, I'm from New York originally." I said, "Yeah, where?" He says, "Brentwood." I said, "I taught in Brentford for 33 years." He says, "What's your name?" I said, "Art Freed." He said, "Art Freed?" He said, "I'm Al Maldonado." And he jumps and he kisses me. He says, "I played football for you. I was in your class." And he's on the cell phone calling all the other kids in Brentwood. So I had to talk to everybody on the phone that was down there.
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah. Your last building assignment was really your first building assignment.
That's it. I spent 33 years in the same building, outside of summer school.
And that's the total number of years in public education. You
Right.
taught summer school too?
Right, I still teach summer school.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still enjoy that.
And outside of playing golf and
Travel.
What? Okay, tell me about the travel. Where
Just
have you gone and where are you planning
the best
to go?
trip I've ever been. I've been when my wife was alive. We were all over Europe. She worked for a German company, so we used to. She used to go over for business meetings in August, and after summer school, I would fly over and we would go to a different part of Europe. I've been to all the islands in the Caribbean, but this year I had a chance to go to Cuba. Before President Carter went to Cuba.
And that's just this week he's making headlines.
It is. Anyone who has a chance to visit there, it is the most spectacular place I've ever been in my life. The people are the warmest people you'll ever meet. They love Americans down there. And it's such a paradox. It's the American embargo, yet they use the American dollar as their money system. The people are poor, but they really don't want to leave Cuba. They want their country to be a great country. It's a real strange situation that's existing there.
Were you surprised in any way, Artie? I mean, your background is social studies and history, so that you certainly know your apples and oranges. But when you get down there and you're confronted with the reality of that experience, what changed?
What changed is the amount of decay. It's like ancient Rome. The city is literally falling apart. But it's gorgeous.
You're talking about
Havana. Yeah, it's gorgeous and it's falling apart. Nobody has enough paint to paint the building, so buildings are all different colors. Their electricity is a cord running from one building to another. A doctor in Cuba makes $28 a month. A teacher makes $23. We went into the schools down there. They allowed us, and there's 100% free public education down there. The Social Security is $3 a month. The average Cuban makes $8. We went to the opera down in Cuba. It cost us $5 for fourth-row center seats. If you're Cuban, it costs you a quarter. It's just an absolutely magnificent. Went out to the countryside. I got to ride a water buffalo. Tony the water buffalo. He and I became intimate friends there.
But the restriction of movement for Cuban people is there? None?
None.
Well, if you lived in a certain part of Cuba and you want to move to another part of Cuba, you can do that?
Absolutely.
There's no restriction.
They carry ID cards, that's all. The only restriction that we saw on people's liberties was what we did is we took lunch every day in the Central Park in Havana. Our hotel was right across the street from it. So we would go out with sandwiches to sit with the Cuban people and get to talk to them. The only time the authorities ever bothered them if they thought that somebody was harassing a tourist. But otherwise, people were free to talk to us, say whatever they wanted. Nobody stopped.
What about a language problem there?
No language. Most of them speak English.
Is that right?
Yeah. First thing they try to do is sell you a cigar, which is a phony Cuban cigar, and then they just want to talk to you.
So that was a highlight of some of the travels that you've done anyway.
Yeah.
Other places that you've traveled?
Oh, I've been Hungary was a neat place. I was in Hungary just after 6 weeks after the Russians had left Hungary. And they had literally dropped everything. People were selling bazookas on street corners, rifles, uniforms.
Wow.
The Russians just dropped everything and took off. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
But we...
Is there a place that you'd like to get to that you haven't visited yet? Is there a country or a...
Well, I'll get to every place I want to.
All right.
I'll go to Sweden this summer.
Okay.
I guess one of these days I'd like to get to Israel, but I'm not in a hurry right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's let things settle down a little bit over there. Like maybe the Orient. Haven't seen that part of the world at all.
Looking back at a career of 30 some odd years, is there anything that you miss?
Did I miss?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It was one great run.
Okay. What about, because I know you're a reader, what's the name of book that has influenced you in large measure throughout your life?
Trash.
Okay.
If there aren't 13 Nazis killed on the first 2 pages, I don't read the book. I don't know. I just read a book that I really enjoyed. Tom Brokaw's book, The Great Generation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one was fantastic. What was the other one? The Power and the Glory. I forgot who wrote that. The historian who wrote that. William Manchester. Was another one that was good. Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Well, so you read history.
Yeah, I read history. I read trash.
Okay. That's a good balance. Most history is trash anyway.
I guess so.
You were going to tell me a story about a jacket.
Oh, it was a union thing with an administrator that was my first run-in with a certain administrator X. What had happened was I had this habit of getting to school very, very early for years. I'd like to be prepared for the school day, so I was always in half hour to 45 minutes early. So when there were cuts in the budget years ago and they took the aides off the bus platforms, Steve Howland had said to me, Artie, would you do me a favor and go out on the bus platform? So I was out there for 15 years. Every day, morning, I was greeting everybody, doing everything, doing my regular job in the building. Administrator X comes to the building. All of a sudden, I look at my schedule. I'm scheduled for bus duty and a duty in the building. And I went into him and I said, look, not for nothing. I said, you can't do this. He said, I can do it. I said, you can't do it. I said, first of all, you're supposed to have aides on the platform. I said, second of all, I have 2 duties. He said, I can do it. So I filed a grievance and it went through to arbitration. The arbitrator awarded me $3,000 for time spent on the platform, which I went to Italy with. And I bought a leather jacket, custom made. And I came back and I said to this administrator, I said, how do you like my new jacket I made in Italy? He said, oh, it's gorgeous. I said, you should like it, you stupid. You paid for it.
We're going to walk away from here now and remember as we leave the building 4 stories that you wanted to tell and forgot about. And so while we have the opportunity, is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have asked about? Or is there any portion of this story that has yet to be told?
No, I just think of the changes that have taken place in my lifetime. I was the last generation to listen to stories on radio.
Yes.
I was the first generation to have television, which of course has been probably the greatest influence on my life. I remember my father would not buy a television until a large screen TV came out. And finally, in 1949, he bought a 16-inch RCA black and white TV for $700. Oh. I still have the original receipt at home.
Do you?
Absolutely. And then I just think of all the changes, that have taken place since I was teaching when we first started showing the old movies with the 16mm projector.
Yes.
And of course, you had to have the loop.
Yes.
If you didn't have the loop, it teared the film.
Yes.
Would tear the film. And you had to have your Scotch tape next to the film. And then, of course, somebody would come back 10 minutes later. Who spliced this film? Where's this section of film? It's on the floor there. Then, of course, we went to film strips and single loop. And
the technology.
Yeah, it's just amazing. When I'm able to stand in front of a classroom full of kids now and say, did anyone ever hear this record? And they look at me, record? Yes. What record? I said, DVD, song, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
It's just the world, the changes. And I don't know if it's necessarily for the better. I think if I would be willing to give up every one of these things except for air conditioning. I decided I can't live without air conditioning.
And the maps, the countries, the geography of the world.
Absolutely, piling them up in the storeroom one year after another.
Yeah.
Right? With the globe that used to have the South Africa on it.
And Artie, the events of
Belgium, Congo.
All the events that have occurred while you were teaching or while we were in the classroom.
I was born in 1945. And historians claim that more has happened in the history of the world since 1945 than all other time before. So, and I remember every bit of it. So it's amazing.
the visits that we've had of people to the district, the period of the assassinations in the 60s,
I remember Kennedy's assassination, watching that on television.
the Challenger disaster.
Yeah.
And of course, most recently, the event that has happened after your retirement.
To show you how serious, one cute story, how serious people take me. The day that Kennedy was shot, I was a freshman in college, and I just finished an English exam. And I walked out into the street. I finished the test early, and people, the pictures that you see, people gathered around cars, listening to radios, and I stopped and I listened, and I went back into the classroom. Another time, I walked into the room, and I said to the professor, I said, President Kennedy has just been shot. Another one says to me, I'm not in the mood for your stupid jokes.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody ever took me seriously.
Maybe you cried wolf too often.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Might have.
Listen, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us, there's one other question. You have retired already, but I want to ask you where you were and what your thoughts were as a social studies teacher and as a history person when the World Trade Tower was hit.
Oh, I was watching it on television. What happened was I wake up every morning at 6 o'clock, still, no matter whether I'm working or not, and I watch NBC Squawk Box, the show, and they were reporting that there was a fire at the World Trade Tower. And at that point they didn't know that a plane had hit it. And I tell you right now, the stock market futures were up about 100 points at that point. Okay, I come out. And I look at the bottom of the screen, the futures of the stock market are down about 250, and the other tower was burning. And that's when they showed the plane coming around. Mm. And I was, and the thing is, I was alone, and I know my son works in the city near there. So I tried calling him, and I got him, luckily. He was sitting on a New York City subway train when I got him on the 59th Street Bridge. They had stopped the trains and everything from going to the city, and he had to walk back into Queens where he lives. Mm. But thank God he was all right.
Just another one of the horrific events that have occurred, but they're life-changing events.
But you know, it's amazing how life just goes on. Yes. It's just amazing. You know, if you want to put yourself in the mind of the people who lived through Pearl Harbor, and life went on. You know, the Pearl Harbor, the war, the terror of it, and we built a better world out of it. Hopefully.
And you've proven something already to all of us who may be watching at this stage, and that is that there is life after Brentwood.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Artie, thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
John.
so much.